Hi, I'm Kaye England, and I am so excited to have the opportunity to share with you why I love my Laurastar Ironing System as much as I do. I am primarily a piecer. I think a quilter's a hard term because I piece way more than I quilt. And the Laurastar has been one of my best friends in this business for at least 10 years. One of the things that I always love about having an iron that does this much work for me is that my fabric is flat prior to my beginning anything. So if I'm going to cut a strip, I absolutely want that flat. And I'll tell you the reason this system does for me what I have never found another would do, and I've tried most of them, is I don't have to spray an agent into my fabric. I can iron 5, 6, 7, 8 layers of a wrinkled fabric one time with this iron, 0 agents, and it is as flat as a pancake. So those are the reasons that Laurastar first became a huge attraction for me as a piecer. And I have used it probably for at least 10 years. And in that time frame, I have learned other things I love about it that I really didn't know I liked as much as I did. So what I'm going to do is to give you a few little tips and tricks about why a good iron can change your quilting, your piecing, and even your finished results of quilting. And if you do machine embroidery, you're going to love it even more. Today, I'm going to be working on the Smart Eye model. Now, there are different models available, and the board, one of the things that I love is the I and the U have the active board. So when I want this board to come up, which I do for some things, then all I have to do is press that button and that board will go down. Those are probably features that make this so desirable for piecers. I'm first going to show you on a block, when I get ready to press a block, what's really nice about this is on my particular one, I have lines, and see, I can actually help this by just positioning that. And I'm going to, now I did pre-iron these little pieces, and I'm going to just give this a little hit. And look at this. See, I've got so much steam here. And I'm going to take this one this way. I'm going to iron this, and then I'm going to show you what I've done. Now, I don't need any spray. I'm not opposed to it, is if you as a user feel like you need it. But I have found, honestly, that most of the time you need your spray because your iron isn't doing the job. So now I'm going to give this another little hit, and I'm going to get this block. I can actually, folks, I can take a block that wasn't particularly a perfect square, and I can make it a perfect square with this iron. So I just hit that. I didn't feel like I had to press this open, but if I had, it would have been a dream to do so. So there's every one of my blocks. I do iron heavily when the block is completed and prior to putting it into the quilt. I don't actually iron my elements as I'm piecing, but when the block is done, I do what you just saw me do. I give it a hard press. Now, let me also address, because this is a system with a boiler, when I'm asking for a lot of steam and demanding a lot, you will hear the motor running of that boiler is reheating the water, making sure it's ready to give me this fabulous amount of steam. So I am going to hear that noise every now and then. And to me, that's kind of like it's doing its job. When it comes to putting your bindings on, that is another reason that I am crazy about this iron, this system, this entire system. Unlike lots of piecers, I do not press my binding in half. prior to putting it on my quilt. And I know a lot of people like to make the binding and then go to the iron and flatten it and crease it. I have found if I don't do that when I apply it, then any of that little fullness that you encounter, regardless of the system that you put it down with, regardless of your brand or any of that, I have found that you get a little gathering. And if I don't press that seam first, I believe I get a better job when I bring the finished product back to my iron and I flatten it. So what I've done is after I put this down, now I've been pressing on this one, so I'm gonna have to hunt a segment that's open. What I would do is I pick up my iron, I'm going to come to this. Now the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this flat now, and I'm going to take it all the way back, and I'm asking for steam. As a left and right hander, I'm asking for steam as I go. So now I go in that corner just a little bit. Now let me show you. If you look at this, do you see now how that's real crisp, where here it's arbitrary? So if I crease this, then when I get ready to put this down by hand or machine, I have that firm line that works great for me. And I found that by doing this, any of that fullness that hops into that as you affix it, I tend to be able to get rid of. Now, while I've got this little piece here, this has not been washed or ironed other than its initial ironing prior to being quilted. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see, but I like to re-flatten all of this. Once it's quilted and bound, I want to give this a good hard seam. And then I'm done. And that's nice and crisp. And now I'm ready to go put my binding down. I really do feel like this gives me a cleaner finished job, and the iron is my good partner in this process. When I encounter a finished quilt, now the quilt that I'm looking at right now is well over 20 years old, maybe 25. It is hand quilted. It has been washed. It was put in the dryer. I know, don't scold me. I tend to do those things. It's a utility quilt. And so consequently, as you look at this, you're going to see what happens once a quilt is used and loved. It does tend to get out of square regardless of how square it was to start with. So let's just say I had company coming and I was going to put this on the table. I don't want that to look like that. So I can take this iron with the amount of steam that I've got, and you can see this arc. And I didn't fake that. I mean, that's how that's done. It dried that way. And when I dry in a dryer, I soft dry. In other words, I take it out just before it's completely done. And it does, a lot of people like this curling up around the quilting. I don't mind it, but I want a quilt that's square. I want it to be blocked. The old-fashioned way we used to do this, I can now do with my Laurastar. So I'm going to start ironing right here, and I'm going to force that straight, and I'm going to lay this back down, and then it's going to do that. It's going to look like that. So right now it's out of square. I always double check my seam, and I'm going to just kind of give it a Now, if you look at that, I've done nothing magical other than, do you see that? I brought that entire corner back into square with the amount of steam and the fact that this is pulling through. So what it's doing is it's pulling this through, so it's helping to dry this as well. And now I have a corner that is a 90-degree corner again, instead of a wonky corner. One other thing I just have to share with you. For those of you who do your own quilting, and you know when you take a quilt out of the bag, it's just a rumpled mess in most cases. One of the things, and I just picked up a little piece of this, and if you can see this, it's just kind of like like this. It's just a big old rumpled mess. Because I have both a lift, a blower up, and a suction that pulls through, I can enable either. So if I push this button, see how this comes up? If I pull this down, it's this. Because this is wrinkled and I don't actually want to press directly on my batting, I'm going to ask my board to lift. And I'm just going to steam. And I can steam virtually most all of the wrinkles out of this. And had this been a real mess, you would have seen the value of that. One of the things that was a surprise to me was when I picked this up, you know how if you're ironing your quilt, see, look, it just falls off. Now watch this. I'm going to hold it here. The minute that I close this, it's now held my quilt, which would let me now come back and do my ironing. So as long as I have the suction on, it will hold a full-size quilt and it'll hold it in position while I do my ironing. I am an avid collector of 19th century quilts, and one of the things that I have learned is a benefit of this iron is the fact that it reduces 99% or more of bacteria, fungi, germs, and everything in your quilt. So let's say you're doing baby quilts and things, and especially in this time frame, I would encourage you that this iron will clean that and sanitize that product as well. I'm looking at a 19th century quilt. This is early 1800s. And it occurred to me that if the iron could do all of that, why don't I periodically give my antique quilts a little boost, put some moisture back in them, give them a little lift, and sanitize them. So this quilt, of course, I would never wash this quilt, and it is not used other than just in decorative purposes. But by doing this, by coming back, and now I'm going to pull through, so I'm not going to have this lifting it up like this. I want it to pull through, and I'm just going to give it a nice little steam bath. Now, I'm not going to straighten this quilt because, frankly, it's been around a while. But what I'm doing is I'm giving this quilt a little bit more life, and I'm also getting rid of any germs that live in this quilt. So for those of you who have vintage textiles, this would be another great asset. And it goes without saying that I use this for domestic ironing as well. But as a quilter, I have found this to be as important to me as my sewing machine. I hope you've enjoyed this, and for more information, what you need to do is look for your local retailer for the Laurastar Ironing System. Happy ironing!